Welcome to part 2 in the video series on chapter 1, Origins. Remember, as we ended our previous one, we were talking about the belief in the idea that the dead were messengers between the world of the living and the spirit world, and that we see that in some of the remnants from that prehistory time period. Ceremonial centers and burial sites became a thing. We have megaliths, which are called great stones. And then we had a dolmen, which you see an example of here, where you've got upright stone slabs, and then there is a roof over those that forms, it's the capstone. Okay, so not only do you have these two kind of early column type structures, but they're big, slabs of stone, but over the top of that you have that slab that is the dolmen or the capstone. This whole thing creates what we call a dolmen. So you've got places inside here where people could be buried. Now you've got the tomb that it creates would sometimes be covered with dirt, or it might be covered with rubble to form this mound shape. Now, the shape was very important because that was symbolic of a sacred mountain. It was also had that kind of fertility and earth mother connection because it was like a procreative womb shape. So these are our early post and lintel constructions, and that's going to be an important part of architecture throughout the rest of history, okay? Where you have two posts, laying on top of that is another similar type structure, and that creates a lintel. So this is a post and lintel. Now, the lintel helps, it bears down on the weight of these two and keeps it all standing. Now, one location that we found some of these burial structures is in Turkey. We have Stonehenge, which is in England, and it was considered a celestial observatory. It was also a site for funeral rituals, and there are a lot of excavations that have been done at that Stonehenge site in Durrington Walls. On this next slide, we see here is a wonderful picture. So you get a close-up, real-life picture of one of these dolmen kind of sites, okay? You've got the post and lintel construction idea, right? Because you've got the two column type, and then over the top, you have that lintel. But you've got this interesting dolmen with these slabs, right? The dolmen tomb made use of the simplest type of architectural construction, that post and lintel principle. Here we have the figure of a stone pillar, okay? And this one was found in, translated Potbelly Hill in southeastern Turkey. And so you see here, we start to see not only the use of the stone structures to create a memorial site, but you also see the carvings, okay? We've got early sculpture here where the shape of an animal is carved out from that piece of stone. So it becomes ornamental as well as telling a story or memorializing something. Here we have an aerial shot of Stonehenge that's in Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, England. Now, they date this at like somewhere between 3000 to 1800 BCE. It's made out of stone. It's a diameter of circle, 95 feet. The tallest upright piece is 22 feet high. So you think about somebody that you know that's 6 feet tall, and then imagine 22 feet. So you can see the magnitude of Stonehenge. So when we think about the birth of civilization, we've had that shift from rural to urban culture. No longer, people are not just living out in the country, they're moving and creating communities. So it's more of an urban culture. There are self-sustaining Neolithic villages and communities. we have this development of counting and writing. The writing evolved from just counting and was a landmark event. It made it possible to record and preserve information. So some of the things that we saw evolve would be a clay ball like this one in the up top picture. Tokens would be placed inside a hollow clay ball, and these were used to represent specific commodities. Okay, so if there was a cone shaped one, okay, that represented a unit of grain. Okay, so that would be a certain amount of grain. An egg shaped one was for a unit of oil, so a certain amount of oil. So someone would put in, I'm sending to you, okay, so much grain and so much oil. And so you would have inside this clay ball, they would push in the right number of cones and eggs to represent that order, okay, or that amount that was being sent. Pictographs ended up replacing the coins, okay? Scribes would inscribe the pictographs on wet clay tablets. So they would take a wet clay tablet, a lot like this, and instead of having that clay ball with those pieces inside, they would actually put the symbols that would represent the pictures, okay, that would represent certain amounts. Cuneiform is a type of script that was used throughout the Near East. And our next slide is going to go into further detail on that. Here's an example of a cuneiform tablet. Both cuneiform and hieroglyphics started as pictographs. All right, Sumerian writing was inscribed on wet clay tablets with a sharp reed that they called a stylus, unlike hieroglyphics, which were actually carved on the stone or written on papyrus paper. The early pictographs of Sumer soon became simplified into wedge-shaped symbols, cuneus, meaning wedge-shaped. The Sumerians had about 600 cuneiform signs, okay? So imagine our alphabet has 26 letters that we will put together to form any number of words. For them, they had symbols, okay? And they had 6 of these different cuneiform symbols or signs. Eventually, many different languages in the Middle East were written in cuneiform. So a lot could be recorded on, a tablet. Another part of civilization was metallurgy, the Bronze Age. This was kind of a game changer. Metal began to replace that early stone and bone. So think about what this does. This gives us greater opportunity for control over nature. They can have harder, more efficient tools and weapons. They can travel and trade, with other people. And this was very essential to that Bronze Age culture. So you had the early development of like coins, okay? Bronze casting spread from Mesopotamia throughout the ancient world. And you had these are examples of some Chinese master metallurgists, which they were great with metal art and things such as that. So we start getting some very civilized, very different kinds of tools and weapons and whatnot. This is an example of Egyptian hieroglyphics. This is a lintel, okay? So remember the post and the lintel would go across the top. This is an actual lintel from the tomb of Mene, an old kingdom during that 6th dynasty. This is made out of limestone. So not only are we seeing this as things that they would use for everyday trade and whatnot, we're also seeing it as part of the architectural design, and it is telling a story. Here's a tablet from Sumer. It's written in cuneiform. It's a record of the accounts listing the sale of animals and such commodities as beer and bread. So this is becoming part of that everyday life and the exchange of goods and services. This is a Chinese oracle bone, okay? So this was an actual bone that was used. Instead of a clay tablet, it was used, the bone was used. It bears a kind of like calligraphy inscription that asks whether there will be a disaster in the week to come. A later inscription notes that there was indeed a disaster in the form of a military invasion. So we see this throughout all the different regions. Everybody's becoming more civilized, and they're using whatever products and materials they have. Here is a head of the Akkadian ruler Sargon I. This was found in Nineveh, Iraq. It's made of bronze. This is now in the Iraq Museum in Baghdad. Now, so many of the early art forms have been damaged with war. There's been so much war in the Middle East over the regions. But again, you see it out of bronze, okay? And it's a depiction of that ruler. Here you see a ceremonial vessel with a cover. This was in the late Shang Dynasty in China, probably around 1000 BCE. It's bronze. It is 20 inches. This is can be found in the Smithsonian Institute in Washington. Notice not only is it bronze, but you've got all this wonderful decorative detail, and the design of it is very intricate. We've come a long way in civilization. All right, so when it comes to Mesopotamia, which is a region, and in fact, I'm going to kind of click over to the next slide just so you get an idea. This is a map of the ancient river valley civilizations. This was the first civilization of the ancient world, and it emerged in Mesopotamia. This is a very fertile area that lays between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers of the Southwest Asian landmass. So here you see the Tigris, you see the Euphrates, okay? Because there's two rivers right here, remember, people are settling near water. These are the best places for farming and all of this. This is the most fertile soil is near these rivers. So you've got Mesopotamia that forms right here at, this area between these two rivers. So this is a wonderful, fertile, great place to be. So we have this river valley civilization as one of the early civilizations in Mesopotamia, 4000 to 2000 BCE. There was an urban life. A lot of people settled there. Political institutions we start to see. There's a specialization in division of labor. There's trade and large-scale farming, because again, if we go back to this map, notice you've got this Arabian Sea here. You've got the Mediterranean Sea. You've got the Black Sea that goes into that. So this is a great location for trading, okay? So those kinds of trading and large-scale farming, very prevalent in this river valley civilization. Wheeled vehicles and sailboats are created. There's the bronze tools and weapons, writing and record keeping, a solar calendar. So we get some beautiful artwork from this time period. Here is the standard of Ur. This is a double-sided panel that's inlaid with mosaics of shell, lapis lazuli, and red limestone. This one's entitled War. And so we get a visual evidence of the social order in the division of labor that prevailed in Mesopotamia. We have a commemoration of the Sumerian victory. We have, this one is, called War. So on the lowest register, on the side of the panel, we have a record battle in which 4 wheeled chariots trample the enemy, and you see the people like under there. In the middle register, you see prisoners are stripped of their clothes by soldiers wearing leather cloaks and bronze helmets. And in the upper registry, you see the captives are paraded before the ruler and his officials. Now, there's a second side of this, and that's called peace. So this whole thing depicts a victory battle at which the seated ruler and 6 of his officials are holding goblets, and they're entertained by a harpist singer. Okay, so that's on the top registry. The middle shows a procession of servants herding animals that might serve as good or sacrificial tribute, and the bottom register shows foreigners, possibly prisoners of war, carrying bundles on their backs. Now, Mesopotamia itself is called the land between rivers. And remember, we saw on that map, it was a very fertile crescent region formed by that Tigris and Euphrates.